Hi, my name is Karen Ip. I'm an aspiring toy designer and a freelance digital product designer based in Los Angeles, California. In this presentation, I'm going to take you through my entire life, as far as I can remember. And along the way, you're going to learn all about the pivotal moments in my life, which might be a little too much information, but you're going to get to know me. After the presentation of the Lifeline, I'm going to give you a thematic summary analysis of all the events, and my presentation uses the Dexi methodology to present the idea that designers are more than problem solvers within a human context, as proposed by Professor Maria Sanchez. I'm going to use the Dexi methodology as a self-reflection exercise on my own humanity and why I'm pursuing toy design and play as a career. You're going to see everything. As a disclaimer, I speak only from my point of view, and as with anyone when they talk about their life, right? And there are many ways to view a subject, but there's still value in our different and limited perspectives. As you listen and watch my presentation, I hope you can come with an open mind or heart as I share some of my deepest thoughts and experiences with you. Anyways, enjoy, and I'll see you along the way. Alrighty, welcome to my Lifeline. So in 92, I was born in Hong Kong to two parents, Agnes and Benny Ip. And at age 1, I had blankets as security objects. My parents gave me 2 blankets, a pale yellow baby blanket and a floral sleeping blanket that I still sleep with today. Age 2, my brother was born. My first thought was playmate or enemy. In 94, my family moved from Hong Kong to Canada, and I discovered airplane sticker books. It's one of the first storytelling devices from my memory. At age 3, I watched Teletubbies on television. My paternal aunt gave me a Teletubbies doll while I watched the kids' show Teletubbies. I thought the whole show was really surreal and worshipped infantilism. Also at age 3, I lost my beloved yellow blanket in a fight. My brother and I fought over my yellow blanket, which resulted in the blanket ripping in half. My mother made me dispose of the blanket, and I was very, very distraught. About age 3, maybe this was somewhere in between age 3 or age 6, but anyways, it was early on. A family friend gave me a Piglet doll from the Winnie the Pooh show. I liked the way the soft toy looked and felt. I would take it everywhere, and I gave Piglet a very distinct personality with great transformative qualities, which was very different from the cowardly character on television. When I was age 4, I built my first snowman in the patio entrance of my childhood Canadian home. I was confused why he didn't look like the 3 perfectly formed balls of snow I usually saw on TV and in books, but I was really happy to have a friend. At age 4, my mother placed me in an art class for older children, and I felt out of place as I was only 4 years old. I didn't feel like I could draw or perform well. I was really intimidated by the 20 older kids, and I cried to myself in a deafeningly quiet, cold, clammy room. Also at age 4, I moved from Canada to the USA. My mother was going to grad school, so we moved nearby to the university. When I was 5, I had an at-home graffiti attempt. I found my mother's makeup bag, and I decided her lipstick would work well as a marker to draw on the white walls of the apartment complex. The punishment was spanking, and after a few tears, I decided I didn't have a future in pursuing graffiti as art. At age 5 as well, my preschool classmate and I were joking in class, and I decided that I would draw breasts on a post-it. The teacher found out and sent me to the principal's office. The principal said that breasts are nothing to be ashamed of, and forced me to wear my boob drawing on my chest. I was agitated that I had lost control of a sex joke. Also, in the same year, I had a Pokemon obsession. Pokemon was the latest childhood craze. Kids at this time would purchase and play with many trading cards, action figures, and video games related to this brand. I had perceived abandonment as a child that didn't have good listening skills or understanding of my external environment. My parents left me for a week with some family friends, and I thought my parents had abandoned me. I waited every day at the door for them. When I was 6, my family moved to the city next door so that we could live close to the elementary school that I would go to. Also, when I was 6, I met my childhood best friend of 24 plus years. She has always encouraged my creativity and tolerated my quirks. When I was preschool and kindergarten, as a foreigner, my English was really poor and I was unfamiliar with American culture. The kids in my school taught me how to play hand games and rhymes, which I was slow to learn to socialize. I got homesick at a sleepover. I went to a frenemies which is a friend and enemy put together, a frenemies sleepover, and I felt very uncomfortable because I was shy and I didn't know how to socialize with others. The idea of staying overnight at a stranger's house made me sick to my stomach, so I called my mother to pick me up. Family friends gave me a white bear that I took everywhere, and my tears and drool hardened onto him. I refused to wash him, and my mother eventually made me throw him away, and I resented my mother's control and cried for what seemed like days. Due to my inability to assimilate with the other girls in my class, I was often left alone and would make friends with whomever bothered to speak to me. I was often confused about my situation, and I distrusted others with their inconsistent behavior. My grandmother is a very tall, has a face full of vibrant makeup, and dresses like an 80s fashion icon. As a child, I did not like her because I did not realize she had mental illnesses and would often talk to herself. As I am grown up now, I know I have more in common with her than I'd like. Her personality is a part of mine. As a child, you have no choice but to submit to the worldview and values that your parents teach you. I often felt powerless as a child, and I learned the impact of curse words and how you could offend or shock others. I began cussing as a defense mechanism against the society I lived in and others who tried to cross me. I learned that being a bigger asshole than other assholes was beneficial. My aunt traveled from Hong Kong to pursue her university studies in America. Cherry has had an enormous impact on my life, but mostly I felt like she was the older sister I never had. I gravitated towards this odd soft toy keychain on my aunt's backpack. It's literally just a dog in a bunny suit, or Snoopy, right? I gave this doll a very reckless, carefree, and absurd personality. Snoopy enjoys jumping and defecating everywhere he goes. When I was 7, my father installed the internet. He gave me and my brother access to personal emails. What a terrible idea! But we learned about the internet and all it had to offer quite quickly. My father enjoyed renting movies for older audiences. I was never allowed to watch the films, but I would occasionally sit in a corner to see why it was so interesting. Why is it taboo? I would watch film scenes featuring complex aspects of humanity and internalize the troubling behavior. As I watched more TV, the media had a very heavy influence on my young brain. I became obsessed with the glamorized and hypersexualized culture of celebrities. Even in books, with cartoon characters, I grew envious of characters like Hello Kitty, who had adult personalities and lives. All these adults seemed to have the resources and freedoms I wanted so badly. I learned more about real life through a popularized online game called Neopets. The concept was to take care of virtual animals. Still, in doing so, you also had the adult responsibilities of earning money and opening your own business to keep your pets alive. My brother got a mini turtle from the pet store. I thought it might be fun to play with the turtles and treat them to a hot bath like a sauna. I put them in hot water for about 20 minutes, and when I finished playing, the turtle was moving very, very slowly. The next day, the turtle passed away, and my brother was very angry with me. I no longer had this winning drawing. The prompt asked for an interpretation of a strange world. My gut feeling was a world full of opposite behaviors, so I drew a landscape where people were upside down and doing various loony things. At the time, when I was 8, I wanted to imitate celebrities like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera that I saw on TV. From scantily clad clothing and dynamic dance moves, I would put on my favorite samba techno beat on the family keyboard, wear the only bikini top I had, and run around the living room. I was not very into sports, games, or anything with rules as a child. If the game was simple, I would try my best to learn it, but I would also recreate the game in my imagination. I was very much in my head and disconnected from my body. My brother and I developed an interest in killing and dissecting insects and other dead organisms. We studied the cause and effect of squishing insects for blood and removing their body parts to see if they would still move. The school introduced me to the word search, but my father also bought my brother and I a few activity books. I enjoy looking for words to kill time. Something is very satisfying about finding something hidden. I became envious of my classmates who had dogs. I begged my parents for a dog, but my mother had a dog phobia and refused. So I went online to look for alternatives and begged my parents to buy me a robot dog for my birthday. After a few months, I was ecstatic to receive the gift, but I soon lost interest in it. There was no connection between me and the toy. I imagined that I could talk to a genie that could grant me any wishes, and the one thing I wanted so badly was a Game Boy Color. Every night, I would ask the genie to bring me the device, and coincidentally, a week later, my father came home from traveling bearing such a gift. My mom researched the middle school near my elementary school and feared terrible influences. She had the entire family move to a school district with a better middle school. Even though my brother and I had not yet finished elementary school, I was happy to leave an unwelcome environment, while my brother felt the loss of his friendship circle. One day on the news, I saw an obese woman get airlifted out of her house because she could no longer move out of her bed. I had no idea that a human being could become that miserable and hopeless. I internalized the shock and did my best to keep thin from that moment on. Whenever there was a field trip, my father encouraged me to take photos and gave me a disposable Kodak camera. Little did I know that would be the start of a newfound passion for documenting the people in my everyday environment. When I was 9, my aunt moved to the States to go to college, and she is a heavy influence in my life. I learned about life, humor, fashion, and culture from her. My father took my brother and me to Legoland, and I fell in love with the driving simulation. Lego car and drive around in a town. You get a paper card license to take home at the end of the simulation. The exercise made me feel grown up, which I enjoyed. I started watching a lot of MTV and discovered an alternative rock artist named Michelle Branch, who carried me through my adolescence and teenage years. Being immersed in music always made me want to create my own narrative. I would spend hours soaking in the bathtub singing to myself. The Game of Life was one of the few board games I enjoyed as a child. I liked the idea of discovering your future. I was not doing well academically because I was not interested in doing homework or paying attention to the teachers. To help me improve, my father said that I could have any toy if I managed to get decent grades. I got decent grades and got myself The Sims on PC. The Sims is a 3D simulation game where you can control the lives of digital people. I learned a lot about adult life through different aspects of the game, but it also gave me unrealistic and limited expectations of what life could be. One day, my father brought home bikes for my brother and me. He spent a few hours teaching us how to ride in the backyard, but there wasn't much space, so I failed at first. The next day, I went out onto the neighborhood streets and managed to teach myself how to bike. I enjoyed bike riding because I felt a sense of speed and freedom. For a period in my life, I was fascinated by the intricately and beautifully drawn characters in Japanese anime and manga. I thought they were more beautiful than actual human beings and yearned to sketch them. I got my father to buy me a couple of drawing books, and when I got them, I realized I didn't even have the competency and gave up drawing the characters. However, I didn't want to stop sketching altogether. I decided I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. My mother started a religious nonprofit, and to support her efforts, we did educational improv shows for a couple of years. My brother and I enjoyed certain moments of creativity, but ultimately resented the experience due to the time consumption of our childhood. In elementary, I enjoyed reading books by Roald Dahl, Judy Moody books by Megan MacDonald, and dark fairy tales. These fictional novels had a sense of the absurd, humor, and various emotions I found amusing or relatable. Living in the suburbs is relatively safe and incredibly dull, so I took my mother's camcorder and began filming my toys in different horror scenarios. I began documenting human life through photography. I started with my second best friend and other friends on field trips, and I still take a bunch of photos today. After finishing homework on the weekends, I taught myself how to use photo editing software. I would draw in MS Paint and edit photos of myself and others. For the next 3 years of my life, my brother and I would spend much of our free time playing online communal video games. Massive multiplayer online role-playing games, or MMORPGs for short, offered me a fantasy world to get lost in while making online friends. Most of the people I played with were in their early to mid-20s, so I felt embarrassed to reveal my age and hid behind a fake persona as being a couple of years older than my actual age. Neopets is a virtual pet game platform. One vital part of the platform is teaching kids and adults alike how to write basic HTML code for their virtual pet web pages. The education was the start of my interest in building websites. In continuing to experiment on poor Mother Nature, my brother and I developed a habit of pouring salt on the neighborhood pests. Snails. We enjoyed watching them foam and eventually pass away. As a kid, you might not care about anything unless your peers or adults above you care. I did not care about my school or my academic performance. I just wanted to draw, dream, and sleep. When grades and award seasons came, my grades were not up to par with everyone else in the class. I did well, but I did not get perfect scores. When I realized I was part of a minority that got second place awards, I internalized that as my lack of capacity to perform. I felt ashamed and embarrassed for being second best, which has affected me as an adult. My 5th grade teacher noticed my creativity and encouraged me to write. So I tried. After reading the many stories I wrote, I realized that they weren't very engaging. A lot of them contained very boring and sentimental human dialogue in everyday suburban situations. It made sense that I lacked life experience and could not write better material. I had my first rollerblading experience at a skating rink at a classmate's birthday party when I was about 7 years old. However, I was so overwhelmed by the music, lights, and massive amount of people that after I put on my skates, I didn't skate. So, when my father bought me rollerblades 3 years later, I wanted to overcome my fear. I taught myself how to rollerblade without all the sensory disturbances, and I felt much more confident. As technology progressed, MP3 players were becoming the craze, and as my father was selling them, he got my brother and I a few variations from China. There is nothing to listen to on an empty MP3 player, so we went with an unethical crowd and started downloading all the mainstream music at no cost. Of course, years down the line, the police were catching on to this theft-sharing culture and started fining people thousands of dollars. As part of my building my group at the summer school, I created membership cards and an online website to discuss our bullying targets. In hindsight, the website had poor security and was not practical or kind to do with resources. I was still doing improv with my mother at this age, but I also started choir in middle school. As I enjoyed singing and performing, it helped me become more body aware. I played Midnight Club, a racing car game made for PlayStation 2, and enjoyed being able to drive because I could not drive in real life. I also wanted the violence the game enabled me by letting me run over pedestrians. However, I eventually found the game dull because it did not genuinely reflect real life. I wanted to transform my life in reality, not virtually. The year before middle school was full of adolescent angst, as this was the period of my life where I was exploring a lot of sexual content on the internet. I did not involve myself in any sexual acts, but I was curious about the pleasure adults received from having sex. I had the secret joy of playing digital sex games until my brother reported my misbehavior to my mother. Being in a religious household did not make the reprimand easy or logical. I felt held back from my explorations as a child. In middle school, kids my age joined online social platforms like MySpace. With the introduction of profile pictures, I became skilled at taking and editing photos of myself to ensure a positive social image. Eventually, I stopped caring about my looks and created photos that expressed my wild inner fantasies. Another PlayStation 2 game from my childhood was Dance Dance Revolution. I enjoyed the dance mixes, but it was not very coordinated at step movements. The game was very popular with kids my age, so I had to learn how to land a decent score to avoid embarrassment. At this point in my life, I felt confident in my artistic skills, had my parents' financial support, and was able to have a stable friend group that made me feel more confident in myself. In hindsight, I find this childhood mindset shallow, but those were the things that made me feel like I had some self-worth. I was very moody and romantic. Most days, I just wanted to make art, lie around dreaming of someone to save me from dull reality. I began writing lots of love poetry, and some of my classmates also wanted to share theirs with me, so I started an online blog to share our inner thoughts. One day, my mother and aunt sat me down at the kitchen table and asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. I told them that I would never grow up and be like Peter Pan. I also told them that I had the outlandish desire to create my toy factory because I enjoyed creating cartoon characters that my peers enjoyed. At 14, my mother let me decide which high school I wanted to attend, so I chose the neighborhood with the better scenery. When I went to Hong Kong to visit my family, my maternal grandmother bought me a limited edition Tamagotchi. It was a virtual pet handheld toy, which I carried for a season, and then lost because I no longer wanted to be responsible for feeding it. Many of my church community peers in my middle school years decided to give their lives to Christ. I wasn't sure because I always doubted the presence of God, and making a commitment was not something I took lightly. I felt pressured to get baptized and eventually went through the process a year after most other kids. I convinced myself that I had a good reason to be baptized, as I was already born into a Christian family. In hindsight, I wish I didn't get baptized for social acceptance. Why couldn't I commit to my relationship with God without having the whole world know about it? Of course, the Bible says it is beneficial to let other followers know, but that's likely why I do not identify as a devout Christian today. My mother and brother pitched in to buy me my first acoustic guitar for my birthday. I was ecstatic as it would be the sole instrument I used to write music for the next 14 years of my life. My father got my brother and me wave boards when they became popular, and I was uncertain as I did not have a good skateboard experience. The mechanism to move the board involved shifting your feet back and forth and was very intuitive to me after a few minutes, and I spent a couple of years riding the board. Some days I would ride the board in my backyard and imagine that I was a train moving passengers along at different stops. My church went to Tijuana, Mexico, to serve an impoverished community. The trip opened my eyes to a different way of living and how the needy prioritize their relationships over materialism or circumstance. Up to this point in my life, I played around with my mother's video camera, but never edited video. I learned how to create and edit short films. My self-expression was at an all-time high as I had collaborators with similar energy. The learnings I took from this class have been with me my entire life, and I am thankful for the opportunity. In sophomore year, I took a health class, and the teacher had us do extensive research on exercise and diets. I learned how to work out regularly, start eating healthier, and remove gluten from my diet to help with my severe acne. When I was 15, I always had this underlying feeling that I was never genuinely competent at anything because of my low self-esteem. I wanted to make music that mattered to me, but felt I didn't have the skills. Still, slowly, day by day, I found time in private to practice and document my creations. In a Christian household, any other belief system would be taboo, yet I dove headfirst into the mystery of the occult. I longed to know my future and the knowledge of hidden realms. In hindsight, I opened up Pandora's box and would vacillate back and forth between beliefs to the present day. In my junior year, I was doing poorly in school, felt insecure, and had severe acne that made social interactions difficult because my peers valued beauty. I also learned about existentialism that year, changing how I saw my relationship with God. I was very depressed and wanted to suicide, but could not go through with it because I did not like physical pain and the uncertainty that the afterlife would be even less favorable. I was still attending church, and I went on an inner city's missions to serve the homeless. We would go in teams to meet and feed people on the streets in an attempt to spread the gospel. My heart longed to understand their pain and experiences, but I knew there were too many. At one point, I came across a tall homeless man, and he asked my team for a hug. My pastor did not hesitate to hold the man, and I followed his actions. The man was so profoundly lonely, and I felt a surge of healing energy go through my body. I've never held someone in the same way again, with boundless love. I was not very friendly at school, but I cared very much for certain people. I developed a hobby for box baking as it was soothing and easy to do. I made many unexpected dessert gifts for community members and friends on their birthdays, which brought me so much joy. I also never ate anything I ever baked because I didn't want to suffer weight gain. I've always enjoyed classical music, but found some pieces too long-winded and complicated. Then I discovered simple, repetitive, melodic piano pieces by Ludovico that drew me into deep thought and sometimes to sleep. The first time I was ever paid to babysit, I failed miserably. I let 3 children overrun me and damage the walls because I could not reprimand them. This event made me fearful of taking care of children. My friend Donna became obsessed with reading the Twilight Saga series, and I wondered why. The books were thick and I was not fond of lengthy genres. She convinced me to read the first novel, and I became hooked. It was a vampire romance filled with obsession and taboo. The story was relatable to teens our age, and the author wrote the main protagonist so poorly that any individual may have put themselves in her place. The Twilight series was like soft erotica for teenage girls. At 17, I had a shallow, limited understanding of God to be this magical genie that would grant me success, health, and wellness until he didn't. I began to reject God, but still considered the aspect of a higher power through agnosticism. For extracurricular, I signed up for woodshop, which was exciting and terrifying. I was able to create wood cutouts of anything I wanted, but I also did not want to cut off my finger. In another extracurricular class, I joined sculpture and worked with clay for the first time. I learned the material quickly and was able to create sculptures with more precision than I could draw. My family patriarch had suffered his first heart attack. My father was very stressed with work and making ends meet that he had very unhealthy eating habits, which led to this heart attack. I've always wanted to perform my music for others, but I felt very anxious due to my low self-esteem. I tried to overcome my fear by singing live in my English class. It was an extremely vulnerable moment, and it was not the best song I had written, but I was very proud of myself for trying. I have always had mixed feelings about school. On the one hand, I felt like I could educate myself better in a homeschool environment. On the other, public education helped me practice socializing even though I was not a very happy-go-lucky individual. As I've mentioned before, I did not do well in school, at least not in a very competitive school like mine. I felt hopeless about my future because I wasn't sure where to go next. I might pursue psychology like my mother, but I would have to go to a community college, which I dreaded because no prestige was attached. I yearned to be successful in the eyes of society, yet did not have the go-getting attitude or academic competence to thrive. My mother convinced me to take a few creative classes in nearby art colleges, and I I eventually took a gap year to build an art portfolio to pursue graphic design. I chose to go to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I moved to New York from California and put aside my fears when meeting new people. I also tried many things I never want to try again, like going to a club to dance with strangers who grope all your privates and pretend to have fun. At the tail end of 2012, Hurricane Sandy came to New York City, destroyed beach homes, and shut down the power and facilities for about a week. My dormitory had no power or water, and my college best friend and I packed our bags to find better accommodations. We both lacked sleep and were exhausted. We got into a car with two strange but kind men and went towards the hurricane. My friend and I stayed in a hotel without power and discussed our lives and trauma for a few days. When I had arrived in New York, I noticed many homeless beggars. Some were real, some were fake, but my naive heart ached for them all. I made a point to feed and spend time with them. However, I realized I could not rescue them as I was only a student and did not have many resources or plans to help them out of their situation. 2 years into college, I started a book club looking for community. I created a stable environment for a group to read books, watch movies, and discuss life. I value friendships a lot. I feel closer to my friends than to family sometimes. I often wanted to show my affection by making them customized art gifts. Vulnerability is a complex subject for me. I often feel like I have complicated emotions that cannot come out clearly through words. I also had an exhibitionist streak, so at this time, my friend and I created an art zine featuring my bare body and the complex, distressing emotions I felt in isolation. I took another sculpture class my sophomore year of college and had lots of fun exploring taboo subjects. I made severe and humorous sculptures, from a funeral cabinet for domestic violence, an existential stop motion about suicide, to a cave-like phallic sculpture. After my sophomore year of college, I applied for design internships, and the result was 2 part-time roles at 2 startups. I realized I enjoy working for different people doing different things and not staying put in one place. My sophomore design portfolio had many conceptual explorations, but I mainly wanted to make playful sex jokes. Humor and taboo subjects give me joy. I made a stop motion featuring a cow with a penis as a horn in an experimental class. In another design course, the teacher told us to practice one activity for a whole semester and record the process. I tried to write a song every day and found it challenging to push through at times. Despite the bizarre contents in my sophomore portfolio, I followed guidelines well and produced more than was expected. The chair awarded me top marks, and I felt I had finally achieved something with my self-expression and hard work. After my sophomore year of college, I interned with a small design studio for about 2 months. I found designing logos and redrawing floor plans unstimulating, but I enjoyed looking at design furniture and posting on the blog. When I was 22, I had a mental breakdown going into junior year and needed to leave the city for a week. I took my emergency fund money to decompress and go to Ireland with my mother. I was never an obedient student to start with, and in my senior year, if something didn't sit right with me, I really just didn't want to do it. So I made sure I did the portfolio work my teachers wanted, and then I did the portfolio I actually wanted to do. After graduation, I found an internship with a rental platform startup. The environment was psychologically unsafe, but I didn't know well enough to leave. In the end, I was also not what the company needed, and so they let me go. Immediately after the nightmare internship, I went into a freelance visual design/user interface role with a large company called Sotheby's. I enjoyed the work and the people, and I stayed there for over a year. As my boss left, the company looked for other unnecessary employees, and I was on the chopping block for layoffs. As I lost my job, I broke up with my partner at the time and felt like my entire world was falling apart. As the new year started, my father got his second heart attack. 5 months later, I found a design role with a previous boss. I played various roles and had a lot of fun building relationships in the platform for the next 2.5 years. As I moved from visual design to user experience roles, I began doing a lot of user research and found that my natural interviewing ability applied directly to my work. I really enjoy learning about other people. I never knew my paternal grandmother well as she lived in Hong Kong. She was uneducated and worked all her life for her 7 children. I will never forget her care and concern for my well-being and her delicious steamed fish dish. My family flew to Hong Kong for her funeral, and I was the designated funeral photographer. I may not be affectionate, but I am a very sentimental person. I value the significance of human existence through birthdays. Many people may not like the reminder that they are aging, but that's due to society's obsession with youth. I believe that aging is beyond the degradation of the body, but the growth of our paths. To let others know that I care, I enjoy making personalized gifts, such as videos, to create a closer feeling of community. My maternal grandfather passes away, and my family flies to Hong Kong for another funeral. My grandfather was a political activist and university instructor. A year ago, when my paternal grandmother died, I was able to see my maternal grandfather. after 11 years. And even though his memory was poor, he realized that my brother and I were important people in his life. He recognized me with such love in his eyes that it touched my heart, and that was the last time I saw him before he died. I left my full-time design role for a contract role at a smaller company because I was looking for growth opportunities. I didn't want to feel held back or stuck, so I decided to move on. In recent years, the autism spectrum is getting redefined, and adults are finally getting their diagnoses at a later age. I began researching this neurodiversity and realized I related to many of the sensitivities and habits of autistic people. I felt understood and sad at the same time because I always felt different in the way I socialized with others. I've survived all my life because I may have high-functioning autism. At this time, I think that the spectrum is too broad for me to get a proper diagnosis, so I may wait until the definition becomes more specified. Again, I never did well academically, but I genuinely enjoy learning, especially learning that has practical application. I take courses that will be beneficial to my future goals of starting my business, or that may help with a future job. At the same time, I can meet people from all parts of the world due to technology, and it's satisfying to learn from different cultures and perspectives. 2 years into the pandemic, my mother is anxious about my living situation in New York and wants me to return, so I decided to move back home. 3 months after I went back to California, I decided that my current role was no longer working for me. I felt restless and I didn't want to work. So, to the present, after quitting my job, I take some time to think about what I want to do next in my career, and I think back to my childhood dreams of creating a toy factory. After taking 2 short-term courses, I decide to commit to a specialized master's in design for kids and toys for this 1 year. I'm currently in the middle of the program and I'm not sure what the future will hold. I hope that all will be well and that more growth opportunities will come my way. Welcome back. I hope that you learned a thing or two about me without falling asleep. The assignment honestly makes me very self-conscious as it's all about me and I haven't been this self-absorbed since my teenage years. But maybe self-absorption isn't the same thing as self-reflection, and this is for an assignment. So to sum up some of what you just saw and heard, I've identified about 9 themes in my life, and this is how I think it's affected my creative work and where I am today. So the first thing is religion. Growing up in a religious household gave my heart and home hope, but it also gave me a sense of shame and self-righteous thinking. Another theme is intense, chaotic emotions. I've experienced many mood swings daily in my life and still do. I am sensitive to my environment and its people and often enjoy being alone more than I do with others. I often kept thoughts to myself a lot because other children could not relate to the things that I felt. And having to experience intense emotions daily led to my ability to create art and develop psychological insight. Next theme, perceived abandonment and neglect. I never felt safe as a young child, continually fearing the worst in others and that there could be no one you could genuinely trust. I learned that people will always disappoint you when I was young. I clung to blankets and soft toys as security objects for many years, and I still do today. So, next one is low self-esteem. Because I felt like an alien and I didn't truly fit in with the others, I wanted to be liked and be whatever the world thought was perfect. I didn't have a strong sense of self, even though I held strong opinions, and I unconsciously created personas to protect myself from the world. Next theme, entitlement. Looking back at my life, I often felt like I didn't have enough when I had many things that I actually needed. So I think that my entitlement is an innate trait that I got from my maternal grandmother, as I always have the desire for more. Or that could also be translated as like ambition, and a desire for power, but we'll see. Next theme is the desire to grow up, not in maturity, but in action. So what does that mean? As a child, I always wanted to have adult freedoms. I did not wish limitations to my choices, yet I had to face the reality. I was very aware of people's intentions at a young age and would flaunt my sexuality and any material things that I had to gain control over people. A little disturbing. Next theme is experimentation, storytelling, imagination. With all this chaos going on in my adolescent mind, I experimented with storytelling and imagination constantly. I lived in a world of my own making and often could not tell the difference between reality and fantasy. As I grew up, I never lost my sense of playfulness. Wherever I went, I saw an opportunity to create a whimsical world that reflected the humor I wanted to see in real life. So eventually, certain events would happen in my life to ground me as well, but a big theme would be storytelling, imagination, and experimentation. And the last theme, I think, is like I value my friendships a lot. So despite hardships with socialization in the beginning of my life, I was very lucky to have good friends who thought me more charming than frightening. Friends have always been a source of joy and inspiration in my life. So according to the themes, I value freedom, imagination, individuality, and the breaking of taboos in my life. I believe I am pursuing toy design to continue my passion for play in every aspect of life, whether that's for children or adults. And on a daily basis, I work on my inner demons by creating art, music, and creating imaginative characters. I'm also constantly learning from the passions and kindness of others on a daily basis. Anyways, thank you so much for watching my presentation. I hope at least some of it resonated with you. Feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or email. I will leave a link around here. Thanks for this opportunity, Professor Maria Sanchez, and I'll see you later. Bye.